All right, we should be live on Facebook. Waiting for a couple people to pop in here. As you see, I am not Riley Bowman. So anybody logging in to see Riley Bowman, you're going to be sadly mistaken. I'm going to be the host today for you. But it's going to be a cool show. We got Derek DeBrosse, attorney. He's going to fill us in with a lot of good information. If you guys have comments, questions, this is a perfect time to put them in the questions, the live chat, and we'll get them answered as best we can. But Derek, you doing good?
Yeah, we're healthy, and I'm here at my house. Just I think it's going on week 4 or 5, I think, because I got back from my honeymoon in New Zealand 3 days before the shutdown, and so I self-quarantine, and it's just been in my house ever since.
Man, I could imagine you getting stuck in New Zealand without being able to come back. That would be a travesty, right?
Oh yeah, I've been terrible.
I'm in Columbus, so I'm right down the road from you. And so, like yesterday, if you guys don't know, we got snow, but the day before it was like what, 60 degrees?
Yeah, it's been odd weather this season.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. So, well, we're getting some people popping in here. But just to give you guys a heads up on what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about, winning the gunfight isn't just tactically based on your tactics, right? It's not just about how you squeeze the trigger or your sight alignment, all that stuff. Winning the gunfight starts with keeping yourself out of jail, right? Without being arrested for violating some sort of gun law that you might not have even known because your concealed carry instructor didn't tell you or told you something else, or you heard it on Facebook and you took it as gospel. And so we're kind of going to dispel some of those myths. So should be very informational for you guys, and it's going to be a cool show here. So we are going to go live here and get the show going. All right. So, all right, 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 408. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast. Welcome. I am Matthew Maruster. I'm not your host, Riley Bowman. I'm going to be filling in for him today, but we have an awesome guest that's going to bring you a lot of good information. Attorney Derek DeBrosse from Munitions Law Group. And we're going to talk to him about a lot of stuff dealing with law and how to keep yourself out of jail even before you pull the firearm, right? We sometimes get sidetracked into thinking it's all about the tactical side of it, but there's a lot that goes into carrying a firearm, and we talk on the podcast all the time. We're big on constitutionality, laws being, some of these gun laws may be unconstitutional, but the fact is they're only truly unconstitutional when they're challenged in court and found to be unconstitutional. So whether or not you think a gun law is constitutional or not, you can still end up getting arrested for it if it's in the book. So we're going to talk about some of those myths and things. We're going to get to know Derek. He's a veteran, combat veteran. He's got some good information. He's a firearms instructor, lives out here in Ohio with me. We don't live together, but we live in the same state. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about the sponsor. Our sponsor, appropriately, is our Legal Boundaries by State book. And so if you haven't checked it out, head over to concealcarry.com/gun law book. And it's easy enough to spell that even I can spell that. So it's concealedcarry.com/gun law book. But this book, basically, it goes through every state, and it's going to tell you all those small laws that you may not know about. Can you consume alcohol? Do you have to notify? It's more than just reciprocity. And I think a lot of people say, well, I check my app and, I have reciprocity with this state or that state, but they fail to understand that the gun laws are different from state to state. So it's really important, especially if you're a traveler, a trucker, you go cross country. Really important to know those specific state laws, because you could be violating things that could end up, cause you to end up in jail without you even knowing it. So head over to concealcarry.com/gun law book. You can get the physical copy, And you can also buy the digital copy that is uploaded or updated all the time. So I think we've updated it maybe already one time this year. As gun laws change, we update them. So if you have that physical copy, it's nice, but it's also good to have that digital copy that updates with all those gun laws, so you're not out of date. So check it out. All right, Derek, we are going to get into the fun stuff. I want to just first introduce you. I kind of did early on, but you are out here in Columbus, Ohio. You're an attorney. You work for or in a firm, Munitions Law Group. It's munitionsgroup.com. You have an awesome YouTube channel. That's where I actually found you several years ago. Saw a dude on there with a beard talking about guns and law, and figured out, wow, this guy's in Columbus, Ohio. So it worked out awesome. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into law. Was it, and why guns specifically?
Yeah, grew up, born and raised in Ohio, small town called Piqua. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. Be surprised if you have. Western part of the state. Wasn't allowed having guns growing up. No specific reason. My father had a couple rifles, but I grew up in a very, I would say, politically different household than my politics today. The guns were not really in existence, although all my friends who lived in the country, we would always go shooting growing up and did things outside. Fast forward, got through high school, went to the Ohio State University for undergrad, and decided to go to law school because I majored in political science. I like to tell people I majored in unemployment, so law school was really my only choice. But I always enjoyed civics and law and politics. Wanted to get in politics for a while, so decided on law. Was in the Army at the time, the National Guard. Got deployed to Iraq in the second cycle of the Iraq War back in 03 to 05. Came back and went to Regent University School of Law in Virginia Beach. Finished up, and the economy collapsed, so I started my own law firm. Did a little bit of everything at first, a lot of criminal law, a lot of estate planning, things like that, and realized very quickly that there wasn't a firm, at least in the state of Ohio, that focused solely on guns. So I started doing that, and I cut my teeth on restoration work for felons and people with issues with possessing guns, and became nationally known for the knowledge that I have in that. And I teach that subject matter quite often for the NRA nationally at their annual meetings, things like that. And so the rest is kind of history. Then I met Clay Cheshire, my law partner with Munitions Group, who focused most of his practice on the industry side of things, so FFLs, manufacturers, things like that. And we both had a working knowledge of each other's practice areas, but we excelled in very different areas of the industry. So we thought, let's form a firm that can do soup to nuts, everything involving firearms. So, if you're just trying to put your guns in a trust, we can do it. If you're trying to form a gun brokering company internationally, we can do it. Anything involving firearms or sporting goods, we have the knowledge and ability to handle. So that's pretty much a brief history about me.
That's cool. And you kind of talked about restoration, and I want to come back to that later. It wasn't something that was, on my radar, but just talking to you kind of popped on my mind, because it's something that I get a lot of people asking questions about. So I definitely want to talk about that. But you mentioned that you deployed to Iraq. I saw in your bio, you have a combat action ribbon. So you went out and you actually got into some stuff over there. So that's awesome. You're also a firearms instructor. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been an NRA instructor. I'm guessing around 2010, maybe 2009. It was very early on in my practice. And I'm USCCA instructor. I've taken more armorers classes than I can remember. In the military, I actually was enlisted. I wasn't a JAG officer or anything. I joined a year after high school, and to pay for college, and I was a truck driver. I did convoy security. Wow. And if you remember from the beginning of the war, convoys were kind of the front line with IEDs and things. So it was very easy to earn a combat action badge over there. So, yeah.
Well, cool. And so, you have family out here in Columbus. You guys are doing well, staying safe and healthy.
Yeah, we're healthy. It's just my wife and I in Columbus. My family still lives in Piqua, and they're all healthy. I know they had an outbreak in Miami County, in Troy, Ohio, at a nursing home, but they're doing well. But yeah, everybody's good.
That's awesome. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers that comment on Facebook and YouTube, they're kind of regulars, and we're always checking on each other, making sure, because you never know. Like one day everybody's good, the next day, they know
Yeah.
somebody's in the hospital. So it's good to hear you're doing well. So you kind of started out and you said, you had a couple parts of law that you were interested in, but then kind of expanded out and realized, hey, this guy knows a lot about this type of gun law, and I know a lot about this. I find it strange, or I find it kind of interesting, actually, that there are so many different elements of gun laws. A lot of times people either focus on, the self-defense aspect, the use of force aspect, or they talk about, just regular possession, can I go on this property or not? But there is a big, deep, tunnel that you go into once you start getting involved in gun law, especially you talked about trusts and things. So what are a couple of things that, when people get into coming to talk to you, that just blows their mind? Like they're coming to talk to you about, hey, I want to get some advice about getting a trust for my suppressor or something like that. And then you just start talking about gun law and they're like, I never even thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot. I mean, it's a very astute observation on your part. Most people don't really understand how complex firearms law is. It touches every area of the law. I like to say there's plenty of attorneys who like guns and will advertise themselves as gun lawyers. There's only very few gun lawyers. You can be a lawyer and say you like guns, but more often than not, I mean, I can't remember how many times we made the argument in court that previous counsel was ineffective because they just simply didn't understand the gun laws. Pleading somebody out to disorderly conduct from domestic violence doesn't necessarily fix their issue with regards to guns, things like that. And then we have to come in after the fact and clean it up. So that's a very typical scenario that we deal with. And I teach Second Amendment law at the law school here in town, and I don't have enough time in the semester to teach them probably a third of what they need to really even understand. Because like you said, yeah, it's trust law. It can be it can affect Social Security benefits. I mean, guns are criminal law, possession, business law. I mean, you name it. TSA law. We do a lot with the TSA. If you bring a gun to the airport, just regulatory compliance, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. Guns just affect everything. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of people that come in. The funniest one, I think, at least in the state of Ohio, is we'll get people that'll move to the state from New York, California, wherever, even Michigan, and they'll say, "Where do I register my gun?" And what the hell are you talking about? We don't have a gun registry in the state of Ohio. And they say, "Well, yeah, my gun's registered. I bought the gun. I filled out a document. That was the registration." Like, it's not a registration. That's a 4473 that's kept in the FFL dealer's warehouse for 21 years, and then it's destroyed. They don't understand actually how gun laws work in the background. They just know they go in the store, they fill out a document, they buy a gun, and then they think they can shoot somebody if they feel life's in danger, and that's the end of it. Mm-hmm. It's so much more complicated than that.
You mentioned like there are a lot of gun lawyers that are gun guys, but not a lot of gun lawyers. And why? I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, it seems to me that would be an aspect. If I'm looking to, if I'm an attorney, I go to law school, I like guns, and I see a void in the industry, right? Like there's not a lot of, everybody's doing, probates and wills and things like that. And I could go over here and do this. Is it really difficult? Is that what it is? It's just a big learning curve, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's the majority of it. It's a huge learning curve, and it's not simple. I remember when gun trust first came on the market, we were one of the first firms in Ohio to do gun trust. There's a couple out there, but no one really focused on it. And then it kind of blew up, and everybody was doing them. Even if they weren't gun lawyers, they were just estate planning attorneys. They started doing them, but they didn't really understand the Gun Control Act or the Ohio Weapons Control Act or the National Firearms Act. And if they read it, they would think they would understand it, but they don't understand the vast amount of constitutional law that is behind that law. I'll give you a good example. In the criminal world, domestic violence is a prohibitor from owning guns under federal law. But that's not what you think it is. On its face, an attorney might say, "Oh, well, my client, I'm going to plead him out from domestic violence to assault. Great, we'll keep his gun rights and he won't have a domestic violence conviction." Well, there's a case from, I think, 2008, U.S. v. Hayes, that says assault is still considered domestic violence for federal purposes. So I'll get all kinds of clients that'll come to me and say, hey, my attorney said he was a gun guy, he was a gun lawyer, and told me I would still be able to own guns and pled me out to this, and I'm getting denied. I said, well, your gun lawyer doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the problem. Because they'll read the law and they'll say one thing, but they don't really investigate it and spend the time that's required. I mean, look, it took me probably a good 7 years to really master restoration. It just takes a lot of time and energy and desire. And I think a lot of the attorneys out there are maybe just looking to make a living, which is fine. That's admirable. But if they're not passionate about it, they're not from the culture, they may not have the knowledge base that you may need in your case. So there's good gun lawyers out there, but you must vet them. You must ask them specific questions to make sure they know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to the intersection of state and federal law. That's the biggest issue I see, because most attorneys will get the state law correct, most, because they know state law. But if they don't practice regularly in federal law, they're not going to know it. And that's a real problem I see in the marketplace.
So you mentioned if they don't ask the right questions. So somebody's sitting here listening to us and saying, I'm an upstanding guy. I had a problem in my past, 15 years ago. And what kind of questions do I want to ask if let's say they're not in Ohio, you practice in Ohio, let's say they're in another state, they want to get an attorney. What kind of questions should they be asking to see, if this guy's really able to help them maybe get something expunged or what reinstate their rights?
I'd ask about their gun law experience. I mean, number one, how many cases like this have you worked on? Have you ever been successful in this endeavor? Ever had a client with the exact same facts? Things like that. And ask about their reputation. Maybe try to get some references. The best place to go for something like that is actually the National Rifle Association's Civil Defense Fund. If you Google that, there's a number, and they'll give you a referral. There's a list of attorneys around the country, and they usually give out exceptionally good referrals that generally know what they're doing. People like myself are on that list. So that's a really good spot to start. And that's where we start when we need local counsel in other states. I just had a call somebody from Tennessee today. I'm not licensed in Tennessee, but we can still do the federal side of it, but we need local counsel to handle the Tennessee issue. So call the NRA, get a referral, and go from there. But yeah, there's no black and white answer to that question. There's no specific magic words that you're looking for. It's just kind of a gut check sometimes. It's easier for someone like me because I know the law, right? And I know if they know what they're talking about. It can be difficult for other people.
Yeah. How successful are you when somebody comes to you and says, I've had this thing in my past and I got denied my concealed carry license, or I can't buy a firearm, and I've been upstanding for 15 years. How successful are you? I know it kind of depends on what it was and everything, but is it more likely than not that you can get their gun rights reinstated or restored?
Yeah, so you are correct. Every case is what I call a thumbprint. Every case is different. Up in for the first probably 4 or 5 years of my practice in this area, I had the honor of saying I had a 100% success rate. No longer is that the case. The longer you practice, it's a matter of statistics, right? I do lose these cases, and that's just the nature of the beast. Some cases deserve to be lost, to be quite frank. If the guy just has a horrible record and they're just not a good person, I'll still fight for them because that's my job. But internally, I might be conflicted, but I don't put my personal feelings above my client's interests ever. Nevertheless, that's a side note. It can be very difficult to answer that question. I don't have a percentage for you. I like to think we're on the higher end of successful firms in this regard. We do a lot of restoration work around the country. And by and large, we have good results. That's the best I can tell you.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. I mean, because I know as an instructor, a lot of times people will come to me and, I tell them, hey, keep in touch with me after the class. Let me know how everything's going. And, every so often, every year, every couple times, I'll have students reach back out and say, hey, I got denied, right? The sheriff denied me. And what can I do to get my gun rights reinstated? And I was a police officer, but like, that's totally different, right? Like
Right.
they're like, oh, you must know because you're an instructor. And I'm like,
Right.
look, I don't talk outside of my lane, right?
Yeah.
So I never want to give people bad information, but it's good to know that, there are resources that are that are out there that they can reach out to get help, because, I truly believe that, the Second Amendment, if we have a restorative type justice system, that, firearms and voting and all that in certain cases should come back, right?
Yeah.
Like you pay your penance, and
Yeah.
obviously there's some cases that, are a little extreme, and probably, it's obvious that those rights shouldn't be instated, but it's something that's really important, and I'm glad
Right.
that you're doing that, because, I'm surprised with how many people reach out with that problem.
There's a lot, and there's a ton, and at the federal level, it's even more difficult. There's not an easy way to correct a federal conviction. I don't think I've actually ever restored a federal convict his gun rights. You have to get a presidential pardon. That's what it comes down to.
Wow.
At the state level, it's much easier, and every state's different. Ohio, we're very lucky. We're very classically liberal in the sense that we're very forgiving to people who have committed crimes in our state. For instance, in Ohio, as soon as you're off paper, as we say, or off probation or parole, you're able to vote, hold office, and serve on a jury, pretty much automatically. In some states, such as where we were doing some research the other day, I think it might have been Tennessee or Kentucky, I can't remember where. Like, you'll get 2 of the rights, but not all 3 of your rights back. You have to get a pardon. But in Ohio, it's a pretty straightforward process for the most part. And domestic violence is a little bit tricky, but every state's a little bit different. And you're right, there's a ton of people out there, a lot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So I want to kind of switch into, we're talking about gun laws at the state level and federal level. I know on some people's minds, they're looking at some of these orders that governors and mayors and stuff are trying to implement, as far as, shutting down gun businesses. I know here in Ohio, I had the health board shut down the range which I teach at, so we can't teach classes. And so this kind of exemplifies, Trump comes out and says, hey, the federal level, we're advising that, gun shops and gun sales, those things are essential businesses, but we can't force the states to keep them open. Some of the states are, choosing to restrict those things. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think these governors are going to get sued? You think these types of things will hold up in court? Or
Well, they've already been sued. My good friend Josh Prince sued the governor of Pennsylvania, and didn't win in the lawsuit, but eventually did get, if I remember correctly, the governor to change his position. DeWine in Ohio from the get-go has been pro-gun, if you will, and has said that gun business is a necessary business. So we haven't had that issue in Ohio. I do believe the federal government does have the ability to force states to leave gun stores open. Look, I mean, the federal government can be tasked with enforcing constitutional rights. And at the end of the day, if the Second Amendment's a constitutional right, I think a good argument can be made that a gun store is a necessary component of exercising that right. Now, I've had some more liberal attorney friends say, well, look, the Second Amendment promises and guarantees the ability to possess, keep, and bear arms, but it doesn't say anything about being able to go to a gun store and buy a gun. But I think one necessitates the other. So I think there's a good argument that. And I haven't researched it because in Ohio, there's been no need to research it. I think there's a larger problem, though, with the stay-at-home orders, I think. And I don't want to get into a political perspective, but it concerns me. I'll leave it at that. It concerns me not just from a gun standpoint, but from a liberty standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm in the same boat. I just want to get your kind of thought process on that. So we had a question in the Facebook chat here, and somebody asked about, actually it's on YouTube. He asked about the USCCA. Now, I'm assuming, Jefferson, you're talking about, the self-defense, I don't want to say insurance, but basically having a retainer on attorneys or some sort of fund that will protect you or help you if you have to use your firearm. Now, do you offer any sort of service like that? Are you on retainer with somebody who can pay at a monthly level or anything like that?
Well, hey, look, we're a law firm. A lot of what we do is hourly work. If someone wants to keep us on a retainer and just call us and we bill against the retainer, that's always an option. there's no snake oil to that, right? You have a separate bank account for the client's money. It's there until we earn it. That's always an option. But we do offer something called a quick reaction program. It is not insurance. Basically, it's an allocation of our time for the client to be able to call us 24/7. So if they can't get us between normal business hours, they have, the ability to get us direct, include some consultation and things like that as well. It's kind of paying up front for some legal services to ensure that we're there and that we have a relationship, and then it's ready to go, right? We're in your back pocket for when you need us. And I always tell the clients, look, it's not necessary, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, then there's value to it. So we started offering that type of a product, and we're getting ready to launch a new website where it's automated and you can just sign up online. That hasn't been done yet. But the question you got was that regards to USCCA's?
I think Jefferson, he was just asking about what do you think about the USCCA product in general?
Okay, so I get that question a lot. Full disclosure, I have served on the legal advisory board with USCCA. I am an instructor. But that aside, I can't endorse a product, and I'm not endorsing your product. So now my disclaimers are stated. I know it can be very valuable from the standpoint that I've had clients utilize their product and other types of products where, my fee were 10 grand or more and I got a check the next day. For that client, it was absolutely worthwhile, right? Because he would have had to pay 10 grand out of pocket where he only paid, $250 for the insurance. So it can be useful, but that's the whole premise behind insurance type products, right? You don't need it, but when you do need it, it's damn well worth it.
Right.
But it does work. I will say that, at least USCCA's product, for the limited clients that I've had that have used those type of CA. So I can't answer that question. I will say that a lot of times homeowners insurance will have some coverage, but it's more traditional insurance where you have a winner be acquitted and then reimburse attorney's fees. The problem with that is if you don't have assets and the attorney needs $80,000 up front or whatever it is for a murder charge. Our office, I always say, just might as well expect 50 grand off the rip. We're going to get the money. You're going to sell your house, get another mortgage, sell your car, your truck, whatever it might be. But if you have the insurance, it is available. So that's my food for thought. I don't encourage people to necessarily go out and buy the product. I just leave you with the information and you make that decision on your own.
Yeah, because those numbers, I know people, they don't even believe me when I tell them, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in a defense. And it doesn't matter if you're, acquitted or found guilty. You're still out that money, right? And so
George Zimmerman's defense, I don't remember the exact number, so forgive me if you fact check this. I know it was well over $1 million. I think it was like 1.8 million. I'm not exactly sure the number, but at that point in time, it's astronomical. But I say, look, if you're getting charged with a crime because there's a dead body at the end of the gun, 50 grand minimum, I would say, for a good attorney, you're probably looking at 6 figures plus, depending on how hard the prosecutor fights and how complicated the case is. If I'm walking you through a plea deal, I can get that done cheap, but you're going to plead out to something that you're going to do time on. If you want to fight this, it's going to be a lot of work and very expensive.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat as you. I think companies like CCW Safe, USCCA, their products are really good. And I know people who have used them, and I know that some of the guys that, from full disclosure, from CCW Safe, and they're awesome attorneys. They're great guys. And I know that they would do exactly what, the product, what they state in the product, come out and help you defend yourself. Right. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people think, well, as long as I'm in the right, as long as I didn't break any laws, I'm good to go. And it's just, it's leaving so much out on the table that it's a scary thing, thinking that you may lose your house, your business, everything you've worked for, and walk away, acquitted. But what are you walking out to?
That's a good point. We started teaching our self-defense seminars differently. We used to teach, what is self-defense, deadly force? When is it justified? Started teaching in the inverse. I started to teach when it's not justified, because the cases that we normally get retained on, they're being charged because something wasn't clear, something was ambiguous, or something was done incorrectly. So I use those as teaching moments on when not to pull a firearm, right? It's not as black and white as you may think it is. It's extremely gray. I had client once that was an older gentleman that was he perceived and another gentleman in his perception to be committing child abuse, beating a child in a parking lot. And he pulled his gun, and long story short, he got charged with F1 felonious assault, and he was looking 11 years in prison. 3 of it was mandatory. And he went to the mat, and we went to trial on it, and it was expensive, and we won. But in his mind, he was doing the right thing, but he was still charged with a very serious felony, the highest felony in Ohio, because he was trying to do the right thing in his mind. So it's not black and white. This is an ongoing problem, I think, in the self-defense community, understanding how gray the law actually is and what you do could lead to a charge from the prosecutor's office.
Yeah. So, so avoidance is obviously, we preach that a lot, and I'm sure you do too in your classes and things, but avoidance, right? Because then you avoid even the possibility
right.
of ending up in a courtroom, which you don't mind being in a courtroom, but you don't want to be, a defendant in a courtroom.
Right. It's situational awareness, being aware of your surroundings and I see this all the time. Almost every one of my clients, for the most part, same demographic. It's male. It's usually, 25 to 50 years old, and they have a gun, so they think they're going to be Batman, and now they land themselves in jail or prison. Mm-hmm. You have to walk away from most of these situations. You're not the police. You're not Batman. Your job is to protect yourself and your family. Get out of the area, call 911. That's the best decision.
Yeah, sure. And I want to keep this, nationally focused, right? Not just Ohio law, but, the difference between somebody calling you up and saying, hey, I shot somebody, I need representation, to like a statutory law where, I carried in this establishment and they have a posted sign. And I know states are different, so everybody's, going to chime in. My state does this and that. But in general, as far as statutory laws, people calling up in violation of a law that they had no idea they violated, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it be a magazine limit capacity, or I carried across this line and this was actually school property and it wasn't, or I thought it wasn't. Is that a big bulk of, I know you do restorative, but like, is that a big bulk? Do you see people getting charged with those types of, statutory stuff a lot?
I wouldn't say it's big, but it is an issue. Car carry is a very typical example. Mm-hmm. Carrying the gun in the car the wrong way, and all of a sudden you committed a felony. Drunk with a gun in the car is extremely common, especially for veterans that are dealing with PTSD. Car carry, I'd say, is the number one. At least in the state of Ohio. Nationally speaking, I really couldn't answer that question. I'm not another. And you're right. Every state is complete. Like California, there's probably, if you have a gun, good Lord, it's like probably carrying around a math formula just to make sure you're in compliance with the law. But generally speaking, they come up, but I wouldn't say it's a bulk by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and I'll plug the Legal Boundaries by State book again, because this is one of those things it's really important. And if you don't know these specific laws, I'm sure that you probably had people say, well, I got charged and I thought we had reciprocity and I thought it was all good to go. And they're saying, look, in Pennsylvania, you may be able to drink and have your firearm on you, but not here in Ohio. So, even though we have reciprocity, you're going to get jammed up here. Yeah. So I really implore people, and most of our listeners, they're like I said, they're the regular listeners. They know we harp on not just putting out a post on Facebook and say, hey, I got a question, a legal question. I want to get some answers. And then all their friends are, all these people are chiming in, giving them legal advice on how to stay out of jail with a gun, for some sort of gun crime. And it's like, don't get your legal advice from a poll on Facebook.
No, I agree.
Probably a bad start. And so, yeah. So, Scooby on YouTube, he's watching. He says he entered the broadcast late, but what are the essential elements of restorative work? Are you talking about? Are you talking about what are the main scenarios involves? Mm-hmm. So, could you sum it up in a couple major areas?
He's referring to restoration of rights. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. It's hard to do because that's a loaded question. So if some reason there's a disability that arises, it can be there's nine things, if you will, in the Gun Control Act that would create a disability. And in Ohio, there's 5. And it could be a mix of both, right? And so we have to do an initial analysis to determine what's on your record, and does it create a federal disability, and does it create a state disability? Once you determine that, then your action plan will be driven from that decision, right? If it's federal only, we might take this route. If it's state only, this route. If it's both, we might take this route. So it really depends on the facts, but the gist of it in Ohio is you analyze, determine the disability, determine the action plan, and you'll likely be doing something in court, either an expungement / sealing, a restoration of rights, a pardon, or some sort of motion practice in the court. Then it's not cheap, at least not for our office to do it. We spend a lot of time. We treat them all extremely serious. This is not something you're throwing $500 at. It's going away. This is thousands of dollars of legal work to do it correctly.
And what's the time period to do?
Every case is different. Yeah, I mean, I would say at a very minimum, 3 months, and that's probably unlikely. You're looking at probably more of a minimum of 6 months to a year.
Wow. Yeah, slow process to get it all through.
Slow, but in light of some states, I mean, Florida, it's taken them 7-8 years to process pardons, and that's how you do it in Florida.
Wow.
Every state's different, and some states it's not possible. You just can't get it done because their laws are not as, like I said, classically liberal as Ohio's are.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good info, Scooby. I hope that answers your question. Jared must have been reading, my mind, because the next question he asks it, and he says, from the standpoint of a gun lawyer, what's the most important thing the average gun owner needs to know about gun law? So I know that's we're shooting you with some sniper questions today. Mm-hmm. But maybe a couple of the misconceptions, like the laws that you see people come in and say, well, I thought this, or you hear on Facebook somebody saying, this is that, and you're like, man, I wish my instructor said to do this, or the sheriff told me to drag the body in, or whatever it might be. Those types of things. Yeah. What are some big ones that you see people just get wrong?
Yeah. Well, let me try to answer his question first. That's a hard question because it is so broad. I think one important thing to know is what are the potential ramifications if I violate this gun law? Am I looking at 30 days in jail or 10 years in prison? Because a lot of people don't know that. Look, and this is the answer to your question. I get this sometimes. I tell a person in a consult, well, it appears you can't own guns because you have a conviction of a misdemeanor in Pennsylvania, which is punishable by more than 2 years, and that's a federal disability. Oh, no big deal. It's just a misdemeanor. They're not going to charge me for that. Well, what they don't know is that they're caught under federal law. It's 10 years in prison. Now, think about that. If I beat my wife in Ohio, the maximum is 6 months in jail. But if I do something wrong with a gun, it could be serious. It could be 10 years in federal prison. So that's important to understand, what the potential ramifications are if I do violate the law. Some outliers, some oddball things I've heard that I think are just bizarre are things like if you have a concealed carry license in Ohio, you can only carry one gun. I don't know where that came from. I hear that all the time. One of my favorites, and I've had several students tell me that their concealed carry instructor told them this, that if you have a concealed carry license, you can't openly carry. I don't know where that came from. That's not true at all. Not true at all. So those are kind of fun ones. The registration, guns aren't registered in Ohio. People think they are. A lot of people think they're registered in Ohio. Most, I would say, people think guns are registered, and that's just not the case. So those are some examples of things I hear that are off the wall.
Yeah. And the problem is, and we try, through concealed carry, we put out a lot of training information, right? There's a lot of training, but we also do a lot of educational as far as trying to get to people to say, look, you might have gone to a concealed carry class, right? And your instructor might have been awesome at teaching you the tactics and everything like that. And they may have been a great instructor, but there's just so much that you need to know. And sometimes those instructors may not stay up to date, or they may not give you the correct information flat out. And so it's kind of falls on your responsibility as the individual gun owner to learn this stuff, to actually reach out and try to educate yourself. Watch Derek's Munitions Group YouTube channel. Like, get on there, and you do some great. And I know you're from Ohio, but you do some great in general, not just Ohio specific clips where you have, people send in questions and you answer them. I think this is a point where when we start talking about this stuff is where the individual gun owner turns from I own a gun and I carry it and that makes me safe to I own a gun, I carry it, and wow, there's so much stuff that I need to know in order to stay out of jail, to use my gun successfully. And so it's kind of like trying to flip that switch on as many brains as we can, many carriers out there, to get them from that state of like, as long as I'm good, as long as, I'm going to just say I felt threatened. And as long as I say that, I'm good to go. And it's like, you need more. So do you see more education out there recently? I mean, or do you feel people are more educated than they were about gun law or carrying a gun in general?
I think it's gotten better. In the 70s, I think we had something like 12 states that had concealed carry, and now it's all 50 states. So it's definitely a movement that's taken hold of the country. There's definitely education out there. There's some that's not so good. There's some that's better than others. It's very precarious because you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. You're sitting there in front of an attorney that was called to the gun store to give them the seminar, and you think they know what they're talking about because that's how they're advertised.
Right.
I've seen that in a gun trust seminar before, where the female attorney she had no idea what she was talking about. She couldn't answer the questions. So you have to be careful. But I'm glad that people are trying because I think it's important. And I don't know how gun owners that are not lawyers do it. To be quite frank with you, laws or restaurant carry or whatever it might be, if you're traveling and just trying to figure out the different regulations and laws and how they all kind of play out, it can be difficult.
Yeah, and you're talking about, you mentioned the laws and you don't know what you don't know. So I think for me, if I'm thinking about a lot of the misconceptions, somebody will tell me, well, my statute, they'll say, this is what my statute says. And I say, but if you don't understand the case law, or if you don't understand how that law is interpreted or applied, you don't understand the law. And so what would you advise, or how can you explain to a layperson or somebody who's listening who might not understand, like, what's case law? I know my statute, it says this, and you're telling me that it doesn't mean that. Like, how can they find case law? What's the best way of going about it? And can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Google, honestly, there's something called Google Scholar. I believe you can research case law. The easiest way is to hire a lawyer. I mean, that's why we get paid to do it, because it's not easy. But you can Google around and try to read different articles and things like that. But again, you don't know if it's accurate or if the person publishing that article is any good. Mm-hmm. That's why lawyers exist. But what case law is, or what we call precedent, is you have a statute, but it's got to be interpreted and applied. And the courts they're the bodies or tribunals that do that. And so when they rule on a case, it's a published decision that's available online through research services. There's two namely out there, Westlaw and LexisNexis, which is based out of Ohio. And those two companies are the research services that attorneys around the country and world use. And that's where all the repository of the cases are put. Now, you can get them right from the courthouse if you know what you're looking for.
Right.
But nobody does that, right? That's not efficient. You're not going to read every case on that statute that's ever existed. It'll take you the entirety of your life. So that's why you hire attorneys. But if you want to try and do it on your own, the best thing is the internet, to be quite frank with you. Mm-hmm. The best thing is to start with that statute and then research around that statute on the internet. And just hopefully you're interpreting it correctly.
Right. Yes, I see it come up a lot with, just basic private property issues. Like, can I carry on this? My statute says that I can, and then, but I have to be able to, I have to knowingly violate a sign, or it has to be prominently posted. And there's all this legalese, description that leaves open this big gray areas. What is prominently posted, or what is, or what's obvious to you, or what should I have seen? And so I think that's like kind of the turn where it says, I understand what it says, but now I have to apply it in if you're not understanding that, you could definitely you
That's a
could
good,
definitely end up in jail.
it's a good point. I remember in law school, and they'll tell you this when you go to law school, it takes about a year and then your brain kind of clicks. You think differently. So as a layperson, you read a statute, you know what the words say, but you don't know what they mean legally. I'll give you an example. Under the Gun Control Act, the word individual and person is actually defined. Like if I told you the word person, you know what a person is,
Right.
but only lawyers have to actually define that word. Right. So it's things like that a lot of people don't know. Or the example with the Lautenberg Amendment under the Gun Control Act, it says if you've been convicted of domestic violence, you can't own a gun. I'm paraphrasing. But what is domestic violence? Well, we have to define it. So we go to the definition. And then what does that mean? And then there's a case that says, look, it doesn't have to be domestic violence. It could be assault, disorderly conduct, reckless, assault, whatever. As long as there was an element of violence and factually the relationship is there, it still qualifies. So it's things like that. I think that's a really good example of what you're getting at.
Yeah. And John also mentions he asks about jury instructions. Are jury instructions useful in understanding the law?
100%. That's a really good research method. If you take a statute, go to the jury instructions, what it kind of does, if you go like Ohio jury instructions or the OJI, or I think it's one called the AJI, the American Jury Instructions. Basically what a jury instruction is before a case is rendered to the jury, the judge reads them instructions on what they have to do. Right? They're not just reading the law and saying, is this person guilty? They're saying, look, under this law, there's different elements, and here's what those elements mean. If you determine A, that means B, your decision should be C. So what the jury instructions allow a user like yourself to do is to understand the analysis that goes into the statute. So it's a really good method of research. Even attorneys use that.
Yeah, really good point, John. So we're about 45 minutes into it, so we're going to start wrapping it up. But I want to give you an opportunity to kind of address some of your maybe like tell me about maybe the best or most proud case that you've done, like maybe a restorative case that was tough, or maybe somebody, just a specific special person or something like that.
Well, there's two that I can think of. They're older ones. I had one in a county about an hour and a half from Columbus, and it turned into a trial. I've never had one do that. And the prosecutor who was put on the case was not a civil prosecutor. What restoration is in Ohio, it's a civil matter. It's not criminal. You're not being retried for your crime. It's a matter of your character. Are you a law-abiding person? It's essentially the standard. But this prosecutor wasn't having it. So she brought in the old investigating officers and just basically retried the whole case. And we won. We actually won the case. The judge's decision was limited in the sense that he put a restriction on my client's gun rights. And I had to address that by email with the judge. And I had to educate the court, which is very common in my practice because they do not understand federal law and gun rights. So I had to explain to them how, although you told me my client won, your order doesn't allow for that, because the federal government will look at that and say it's not complete, therefore you're not restored. So he changed his order. So that was pretty proud moment, and it cost the client a lot of money, 2-day trial. 2 attorneys were on that case, by the way. And then I had another one that was even older, where the guy was in his 70s. And he said, I have this such and such disease. All I want to do is be able to hunt with my grandson before I die. And I was able to make that happen. So that was pretty memorable too.
Yeah, that is awesome. Sometimes we forget, like, we forget those little things, right? Like that's why I wanted to ask, because I know the guns are inherent in our culture, right? Like we pass them down to our kids sometimes, we go out hunting and things like that. And I think that it's part of the fabric of American culture. And so things like restorative, getting your rights restored, can really be empowering to people who might otherwise feel, I've paid my penance, I can vote, I can do all these things, but I can't own a firearm and protect myself. And I think that's why what you do is so important, because it's not just a legal thing. It's lifting that person back up to, a protected person with all the rights being protected again, which, unless you've lost those rights, you don't realize how important they are.
Yeah.
And I gotta applaud you for focusing on that. I know it's not an easy, aspect of gun law, but I applaud you on that, because that is a very difficult road to walk.
Yeah, I love it. I really enjoy it. Yeah, sometimes I get bad clients that don't want to pay their bill or just kind of a pain in the ass. That's always a struggle because, I mean, look, I'm dealing with a culture. We're not wealthy. Gun owners are generally not super uber wealthy people. So we have to try and do this on a budget, but it's a lot of work. So it creates friction sometimes. The best case is somebody who understands that and is willing to pay the fee and let me do my job with my hands unrestricted. Then I really love doing it. I enjoy it. I don't have to worry about the stress of the business side of it, and I can just focus on the client as a person and their civil liberties.
Right. That's awesome. And getting back, can you tell people about how they can find the website, how they could contact you if they have further questions or get your YouTube channel out there?
Yeah, YouTube, it's Munitions Group. Make sure you hit the little bell icon so that when we put new videos, you're getting notifications of it. Website's munitionsgroup.com. You can find us there and on Facebook as well, munitionsgroup.com.
Yeah, and you have like six other partners, right? Or 6, 7.
Not that many. I have 2 other partners. Probably soon to be a 4th. We're bringing up an associate that should be there in the next year or 2. Michael Truman, very good gun lawyer. I taught him everything I know. At this point, he's ready to go on his own. Adam Barney handles our trade and import-export business. So if you're looking to import broker guns, export guns to other countries, he does that. And then Clay Cheshire does most of our industry stuff. So excise tax, I forgot to mention that. The tax law is really big in guns. So excise tax, FFL formations, compliance regulations, things like that. And then we have a team of experts of retired ATF agents that we use, as well as other staffers. And we have offices in Atlanta, Louisville, and Columbus.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You guys look, I mean, you think spreading out more or is down the road?
To do everything remotely. So our office in Atlanta is a remote office. We have brick and mortar in Columbus and Louisville. And we have a team of attorneys that we affiliate ourselves with around the country and the world. As far as building out more brick and mortar, probably not. It's not. I don't think it's really necessary at this juncture, at least.
Right. Well, that's awesome. It's good to see that you're doing well. I really appreciate you taking your time. I know we're not paying you your normal fee for legal advice, so I really do appreciate you coming on. I wish you guys the best with your family and stay healthy. I'll probably see you driving around Columbus sometime when they let us out of the house.
Yeah, let's go shooting sometime.
For sure, for sure.
All right,
guys. Well, we're going to wrap it up. I just want to mention one more time the Legal Boundaries by State book. If you really want to understand the state laws, if you're traveling, it's something that you really have to understand, that the laws are different from state to state, and this book really helps you out. You can get the digital copy that's updated periodically, or you can get the physical copy. If you like the physical copy, that's great. You can get both too if you want. So head over to concealedcarry.com/gun law book. And we're going to wrap it up for today. Just a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.
Thank you.